The morning sun cast long shadows across the human settlement on Kepler 442b. Lee Hyun stood at his window, watching Imperial patrol ships circle overhead like metal vultures. Their engines made a low humming sound that never stopped, a constant reminder of who ruled this world. Hyun had been a captain in Earth's Navy once. That felt like a lifetime ago. Now he led a small group of humans who refused to bow down to the Kaleth Empire. They called themselves the Resistance, though most days it felt more like hiding and hoping. A knock came at his door. "Come in," Hyun said without turning around. Kim Tae entered, his face grim. "They're doing another sweep of the eastern sector. 3 families were taken during the night." Hyun closed his eyes. The Kaleth always took people during the night. They said it was for questioning, but everyone knew better. Few who were taken ever came back. "Any word from Dr. Park?" Hyun asked. "She's still at the ruins. Says she found something important." Dr. Park Yuna had been studying the ancient ruins for 2 years now. The ruins were older than anything else on the planet, older than the Kaleth Empire itself. The aliens didn't seem to care about them, which made them a perfect hiding place for resistance meetings. Hyun grabbed his jacket. "Let's go see what she found." The ruins sat in a valley 10 miles from the main settlement. Massive stone blocks, covered in strange symbols, stretched across several acres. No one knew who built them or when. The Kaleth had scanned them once and declared them worthless. That was fine with the humans. Yuna was bent over a tablet when they arrived, her black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She looked up as they approached, excitement shining in her eyes. "Hyun, you need to see this," she said, holding up the tablet. "I've been translating these symbols for months. They're not just decorative, they're warnings." "Warnings about what?" Tae asked. "Something called the Silent Watchers. Look at this." She pointed to a section of symbols carved deep into the stone. "This part talks about a compact, an agreement. The Watchers promise to protect peaceful worlds from those who would conquer them." Hyun frowned. "That doesn't make sense. If there were protectors out there, where have they been for the last 3,000 years? "That's just it," Yuna said. "According to these texts, the Watchers only act when certain conditions are met. When the innocent suffer beyond a certain point. When empires become too cruel." A low rumble filled the air. All 3 humans looked up to see a squadron of Kaleth fighters approaching. Their black hulls gleamed in the sunlight, weapons pods, visible beneath their wings. "We need to move," Tae said, reaching for his weapon. But the ships weren't heading for them. They flew past the ruins toward the settlement. Even from this distance, they could see the fighters opening fire on the buildings below. "No," Hyun whispered. He knew what this was. Another lesson to keep the humans in line. Yuna grabbed his arm. "The energy readings are spiking. Something's happening." The ruins began to glow with a soft blue light. The symbols on the stones pulsed like a heartbeat. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. Then everything went quiet. The fighter ships above the settlement had stopped moving. They hung in the air like toys on invisible strings. Their engines had gone silent. "What's happening?" Tae asked. Before anyone could answer, the light from the ruins exploded outward in a massive wave. It swept across the valley, over the settlement, and up into the sky. When it touched the fighter ships, they simply fell from the air like dead birds. In the distance, alarms began to sound from the Kaleth base. Ships were launching, but their movement seemed sluggish and confused. "The energy surge," Yuna said, staring at her tablet. "It's disrupting their technology somehow." Hyun felt a chill run down his spine. He had fought the Kaleth for years, and their technology had always seemed unbeatable. Their shields, their weapons, their ships, all far beyond anything humans could build. But now their ships were falling from the sky. "We need to get back to the settlement," he said. "People will be hurt, confused. They ran through the valley, past the still glowing ruins. Behind them, the ancient stones pulsed with light, as if something deep beneath them was waking up after a very long sleep. The settlement was in chaos when they arrived. The crashed fighter ships had crushed several buildings, but most people had survived. Families huddled together in the streets, looking up at the sky where more Caleth ships circled at a distance. Choi Min ran up to them, tools still in his hands. He had been working on their stolen communication equipment when the surge hit. "The whole Imperial network is down," he said, breathing hard. "Their ships can't talk to each other. Their weapons systems are failing. It's like their technology just stopped working." "For how long?" Hyun asked. "I don't know. But right now they're as blind as we are." Hyun looked around at his people, scared, confused, but alive. For the first time in years, the Caleth didn't seem all-powerful, but he knew it wouldn't last. Whatever had caused this, the Empire would adapt. They always did. "Gather everyone," he told Tay. "We need to be ready when their systems come back online." As night fell, reports came in from across the planet. The energy surge had affected Caleth technology everywhere. Ships had crashed, bases had gone dark. For one brief moment, the humans were free. But in space above them, larger ships were arriving, Imperial reinforcements coming to investigate the disturbance. Yuna stood at the edge of the settlement looking up at the stars. The ruins were still glowing behind them, and her tablet showed energy readings unlike anything she had ever seen. "The Watchers," she whispered. "They're real." High above the planet, something vast and impossible moved through the darkness between stars. The Caleth scanners couldn't detect it. Their sensors showed only empty space, but it was there, waiting and watching. The compact had been broken. Tamak, innocent, had suffered long enough, and after millions of years of silence, the Watchers were finally ready to act. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at the planet below. His scarred face showed no emotion, but inside he was furious. Half his fleet had been damaged by some kind of electromagnetic pulse. Primitive humans shouldn't have technology capable of that. "Sir," his aide said, "we're receiving reports from across the sector. Similar energy surges have been detected on 12 other worlds." Veltar's eyes narrowed. This wasn't random. Something was happening. Something big. "Send word to the Emperor," he said. "Tell him we may have a new threat to deal with." On the planet below, Hyun gathered his people around the ruins. The stones were still glowing, and Yuna's equipment showed the energy building towards something. "I don't know what's coming," he told them. "But whatever it is, it's bigger than just us. Bigger than this planet." As if in response to his words, the ruins pulsed once more. The light shot up into the sky like a beacon, piercing the darkness of space, and in that light something answered. The Imperial Research Station orbited high above Kepler 442b, its sensors working overtime to understand what had happened. Dr. Song Hana stared at the readings on her screen, her hands shaking slightly. She had been studying strange energy patterns for the Empire for 3 years now, ever since they captured her from a human science vessel. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases," she reported to the Caleth officer standing behind her. "It's not technological, at least not technology as we understand it." Commander Zeklos clicked his mandibles in annoyance. The tall, gray-skinned alien had little patience for human scientists, but the Empire found them useful for understanding primitive technology. "Explain," he demanded. Hana pulled up a 3-dimensional display. "Normal energy follows predictable patterns. It flows from high to low, disperses over distance, weakens over time. But this energy seems to exist in multiple dimensions at once. It's getting stronger, not weaker." Before Zeklos could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed as automated systems detected something massive approaching. "Sir!" a Caleth technician called out. Unknown object emerging from hyperspace. Distance, it's right on top of us. On the main display, space itself seemed to ripple. Reality bent and twisted like water, and from that distortion emerged something impossible. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. The vessel stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Its surface was smooth and dark, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange patterns moved across its hull like living things, pulsing with the same blue energy that had erupted from the ruins below. "By the void," Zeklos whispered. In 3 decades of military service, he had never seen anything like it. The massive ship moved without visible engines or thrust. It simply glided through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. Smaller shapes detached from its hull, what looked like fighter craft, though each one was larger than an Imperial cruiser. "It's heading for Nexus Prime," the technician reported, his voice tight with fear. Nexus Prime was the regional capital, home to 50 billion Kaleth citizens and the seat of Admiral Veltar's power. If this unknown ship reached it, send an immediate alert to the Admiral, Zeklos ordered. Priority Alpha. Unknown hostile approaching the capital. But even as he spoke, he wondered if their weapons would be any more effective against this thing than they had been against the energy surge from the planet below. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Li Hyun felt the ground shake as massive ships launched from the Imperial base. The entire Kaleth fleet was mobilizing, their engines screaming as they broke atmosphere and headed for deep space. "They're scared," Kim Tae observed, watching the ships disappear into the star-filled darkness. "Something's got them running," Choi Min agreed. "I've never seen them move this fast." Dr. Park Yuna looked up from her tablet, where she had been monitoring the energy readings from the ruins. "Whatever answered our beacon, it's big. The Kaleth are responding with everything." "They have," Hyun nodded grimly. He had spent years fighting the Empire, learning their tactics and strategies. They didn't scare easily. If they were mobilizing their entire regional fleet, they were facing something that truly terrified them. "Can we monitor their communications?" he asked Min. The engineer shook his head. "Their encryption is too advanced, but I might be able to pick up their general fleet movements." As Min worked on his equipment, Yuna continued studying the ancient texts. The symbols on the ruins had changed since the energy surge. New patterns had appeared, as if the stones themselves were trying to tell them something. "The Watchers," she murmured, tracing one of the symbols with her finger. "According to these inscriptions, they're not just one species, they're a collective. A group of civilizations that transcended physical existence millions of years ago." "Transcended how?" Hyun asked. "The texts aren't clear, but they talk about moving beyond the need for physical bodies, existing as pure consciousness spread across multiple dimensions. They established what they call the Compact, a promise to protect developing civilizations from those who would destroy or enslave them." Tae frowned. "Then where have they been? The Kaleth have been conquering worlds for 3,000 years. "Maybe they were waiting," Yuna said quietly, "waiting for the right moment, or for someone to call to them." High above them, space erupted, in violence. Admiral Veltar commanded the largest fleet in the Kaleth Empire's history. Over 3,000 ships of various classes, from nimble fighters to massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. He had used this fleet to crush a dozen rebellions and bring entire star systems to their knees. Now he stared at his tactical display and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Doubt. The unknown ship had ignored every attempt at communication. It moved through space with impossible grace, its massive bulk somehow elegant despite its size. Veltar's scanners couldn't get solid readings on it. The ship seemed to phase in and out of reality, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent as a ghost. "All ships, attack formation Delta 7, he commanded. "Target the center mass and fire on my mark." His fleet spread out in a perfect attack pattern, weapons charging. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, particle beams that could slice through the strongest armor, missiles with warheads powerful enough to sterilize continents. Fire! The space between the fleets lit up like a newborn star. Thousands of weapons discharged at once, creating a wall of destructive energy that should have been able to destroy anything made of matter. The beams struck the unknown ship and passed through it like it wasn't there. "What?" Veltar snarled. "Impossible!" On the tactical display, the enemy ship remained undamaged, unchanged, as if the most powerful fleet in known space had just fired at empty air. Then the ship began to broadcast. The signal came through every communication system in the fleet simultaneously. It bypassed their encryption, their security protocols, their jamming systems. It spoke in perfect Calith, but also in the languages of every species in their empire. The compact has been broken. The protected have been harmed. The silence ends. Now. The voice was calm, patient, but carried a weight that made even hardened warriors tremble. It spoke with the authority of eons, of civilizations that had watched stars being born and die. Veltar found his voice. "This is Admiral Veltar, of the Calith Empire. Identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came immediately. "We are what you would call the Watchers. We have observed your empire's crimes against younger species for millennia. You have ignored every warning, violated every boundary. No more. You dare threaten the empire?" Veltar roared. "We rule this sector by right of conquest. You rule by right of nothing. Release all subjugated worlds. Return to your home system. Disband your military. You have 10 of your cycles to comply." Veltar laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. "And if we refuse?" The massive ship pulsed once with blue light. When the light faded, one of Veltar's dreadnoughts was simply gone, not destroyed, erased, as if it had never existed at all. "Then we will remove you ourselves. This is not a negotiation. This is judgment." On Kepler 442b, the humans watched in awe as the distant battle lit up the night sky. They couldn't see the details, but they could see the flashes of weapons fire and the strange blue glow that seemed to respond to each attack. "Something's happening up there," Min reported, his cobbled-together sensors picking up fragments of Imperial communications. "The fleet's in full retreat. They're calling for reinforcements. From every system." Hyun felt a mix of hope and fear. Hope that the Empire might finally face a power greater than their own. Fear of what such a power might mean for the rest of the galaxy. "Dr. Park," he said, "keep studying those texts. If these Watchers are real, we need to understand what they want." Yuna nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the ancient symbols. The stones were glowing brighter now, and she could swear she heard something in the back of her mind. A voice, ancient and patient, speaking words she didn't understand but somehow felt in her bones. The Watchers had awakened. After millions of years of silence, they had returned to fulfill their promise. The galaxy would never be the same. Emperor Zalthek had ruled the Caleth Empire for over 2 centuries. He sat on his throne carved from a single massive crystal, surrounded by the pillars of his ancestors who had conquered world after world to build their dominion. Nothing in the galaxy had ever challenged his authority, until now. The communication from Admiral Veltar had reached him just hours ago, an unknown ship of impossible size, weapons that passed through it harmlessly. Demands that the Empire surrender everything. They had built over 3 millennia. "Madness," he muttered, his 4 arms gripping the armrests of his throne. "One ship cannot threaten an empire of 10,000 worlds." His advisor, General Mortek, approached carefully. Even after decades of service, he knew to be cautious around the Emperor when his mood was dark. "Your Majesty, Admiral Veltar requests permission to mobilize the entire Imperial Navy, every fleet, every ship." "Granted," Zalthek said without hesitation. If this unknown enemy thinks they can intimidate us with parlor tricks, they will learn otherwise. No force in the galaxy can stand against the combined might of our fleets." But even as he spoke, the Emperor felt a strange unease. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything that could simply ignore their weapons. The Caleth had faced energy shields, advanced armor, even dimensional barriers. But this was different. This was as if their attacks had never happened at all. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Song Hana sat in a cramped cell aboard an Imperial transport ship. She had been moved from the research station after the initial encounter, along with other captured scientists the Empire thought might be useful in understanding the new threat. The ship shuddered as it accelerated toward the rally point where all Imperial forces were gathering. Through the small porthole in her cell, Hana could see other ships joining the massive fleet. Thousands of vessels of every class, from tiny scouts to enormous battle stations. A sound from the corridor made her look up. Footsteps, but not the heavy boots of Caleth guards. These were lighter, more careful. The door to her cell hissed open, and 3 humans stepped inside. She recognized the leader immediately from intelligence reports. Li Hyun, the resistance fighter who had been causing problems for the Empire on Kepler 442b. "Dr. Song Hana?" he asked quietly. She nodded, too surprised to speak. "We're here to get you out. Can you walk?" "How did you—" she began, then stopped herself. It didn't matter how they had gotten aboard an Imperial ship. What mattered was that they were here. "I'm fine," she said, standing on shaky legs. "But there are other prisoners, other humans." "We know," said the woman with Yun, Dr. Park Yuna, if Hana remembered correctly. "We're getting them all out." As they moved through the ship's corridors, Hana marveled at how easily the resistance fighters navigated the Imperial vessel. They seemed to know exactly where to go, which passages to avoid. "How are you here?" she whispered to Yuna as they helped another prisoner from her cell. "The Caleth are distracted," Yuna replied. "Their attention is focused on the Watchers. Security is lighter than it's been in years." The Watchers. Hana had heard the name in intercepted communications, but she didn't understand what it meant. The ones who sent that ship, the ones who are finally standing up to the Empire. They reached an escape pod bay, where more resistance fighters were waiting. As they prepared to launch, Hana looked out at the massive Imperial fleet gathering around them. She had never seen so many ships in one place. "They're really going to fight it," she said. "The Emperor is going to order an attack on something that their weapons can't even touch." Yun nodded grimly. "The Empire has never backed down from a fight, even when they should." Their escape pod launched just as the Imperial fleet began moving, toward the coordinates where the unknown ship waited. From the pod's small windows, they could see the massive formation spreading out across space, preparing for the largest battle in galactic history. But at the center of that formation, reality began to bend again. The Watcher ship had not moved. From its position near Nexus Prime, it hung in space like a dark moon, its impossible size making even the largest Imperial dreadnoughts look like toys. Strange patterns of light moved across its surface, and space around it shimmered as if the ship existed in multiple dimensions at once. Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the largest military force ever assembled. He had ships from every corner of the Empire, weapons capable of destroying entire solar systems, soldiers who had never known defeat. Yet as he stared at the alien vessel on his display, he felt small. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another transmission from the unknown ship." "Put it through," Veltar ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was the same as before, calm, patient, but carrying the weight of cosmic authority. 10 cycles have passed. You have not complied with our demands. Your empire continues to harm innocent civilizations. We are disappointed, but not surprised. Veltar leaned forward in his command chair. This is your last chance to surrender. You face the combined might of the Calith Imperial Navy. No force in the galaxy can stand against us. You misunderstand, the voice replied. We are not a force in your galaxy. We are something far older and far greater. We existed when your star was young. We will exist when it grows cold and dies. The unknown ship began to change. Its dark surface rippled like water and new shapes emerged from its hull. Each one was the size of an Imperial cruiser, but they moved with the same impossible grace as the main vessel. This is our final warning, the voice continued. Lay down your weapons. Release your prisoners. Return to your home worlds and harm no one else. If you fire upon us, you will force us to take action. Emperor Zalthek's voice cut through the communication channel, broadcast from his throne world billions of miles away. I am Zalthek, Emperor of the Calith, ruler of 10,000, worlds, conqueror of 100 species. I bow to no one. I yield to nothing. Your tricks and illusions do not frighten me. A pause. Then the alien voice spoke again, and for the first time it carried a note of sadness. So be it. The space around the Watcher ship erupted in light. Not the harsh glare of weapons fire, but something softer and more terrifying. The light spread outward in perfect spheres, each one encompassing dozens of Imperial ships. When the light touched them, the ships simply stopped. Their engines fell silent. Their weapons powered down. Their life support systems continued to function. But everything else went dark. What's happening? Veltar demanded, but his own ship was caught in the expanding light. His bridge went dark, leaving only emergency power. Then a new voice spoke over their dead communication systems. Not the calm authority they had heard before, but something vast and ancient and utterly alien. You were warned. You chose violence over peace, war over wisdom. Now you will learn what it means to face those who shaped the cosmos when your species was still crawling in mud. The Watcher ship began to multiply. What had been one vessel became 2, then 4, then dozens. Each one was identical to the original, each one massive beyond comprehension. Captain Bayek Jun sat in his fighter cockpit, watching in horror as the ships around him went dark one by one. He had served the Empire faithfully for 20 years, believing in their cause, their strength, their right to rule. Now he saw the truth. They were insects, pretending to be gods, and the real gods had finally noticed them. His fighter's communication system crackled to life, but the voice that came through wasn't Imperial command. It was human. All Imperial forces. This is the human. Resistance! If you want to live, power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. The war is over. June looked around at the darkened fleet, at the impossible ships spreading across space like an infection of light and shadow. The empire he had served was finished. He could see that now. With shaking hands, he powered down his weapons and waited. On Kepler 442b, the humans gathered around their communication equipment watched as reports flooded in from across the sector. Imperial fleets going dark, bases falling silent, prison ships releasing their captives. It's really happening, Choi Min whispered. The Empire is falling. Yuna stood at the ancient ruins, which now glowed so brightly they could be seen from orbit. The symbols on the stones had changed again, showing new patterns that seemed to move and shift even as she watched them. The Watchers keep their promises, she said quietly. After millions of years, they're keeping their promise to protect the innocent. Above them, the night sky filled with new stars as thousands of Watcher ships took position throughout the sector. The age of the Calith Empire was ending, and humanity, for the first time in 3 centuries, was free. The throne room of Emperor Zalthek had never known such chaos. Advisors and generals rushed in and out, bringing reports of disaster from every corner of the empire. Entire fleets had gone dark, communication with dozens of worlds had been lost. And still, the emperor refused to accept what was happening. Status report, he demanded, as General Mortek approached the crystal throne. Your Majesty, we have lost contact with Admiral Veltar's fleet. Last transmission indicated total systems. Failure across all ships. Similar reports are coming in from 7 other sectors. Zalthek's 4 hands clenched into fists. Impossible. Our technology is superior to anything in the galaxy. These aliens cannot simply turn off our ships with their tricks. Sir, another advisor interrupted. We're receiving surrender requests. From over 300 prison colonies, the guards are requesting immediate evacuation. Denied, the Emperor roared. Execute the prisoners, all of them. If these watchers want to protect the weak, let them watch them die. A heavy silence fell over the throne room. Even the most loyal generals looked uncomfortable with the order. General Oh Sung had been a slave for 15 years before escaping from the Imperial labor camps. Now he stood in the command center of the human resistance, watching as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. His weathered face showed no emotion, but inside he felt a mixture of hope and terror. The Emperor has ordered the execution of all political prisoners, he told Li Hyun, who was coordinating rescue operations across multiple worlds. Every slave, every captured resistance fighter, every civilian who spoke out against the Empire, Hyun felt his blood turn cold. There were millions of innocent people in Imperial custody across the galaxy. Men, women, children who had committed no crime except refusing to bow to tyranny. How long do we have? He asked. The orders are being transmitted now. Some worlds will comply immediately. Others might hesitate. We need to warn the Watchers, Dr. Park Yuna said from her position at the communication array. They might be able to stop this. But before anyone could respond, the ancient ruins behind them erupted with light. The blue glow shot into the sky like a beacon, and suddenly the air itself seemed to vibrate with an alien presence. When the voice spoke, it came from everywhere at once. The walls, the ground, the very air around them. We know. We see all. The innocent will be protected. On the Imperial prison world of Kethvar, Warden Zulmar received the Emperor's execution order with grim satisfaction. He had always believed that weakness should be punished, and the 10,000 human prisoners in his facility represented everything he despised about inferior species. Begin with the children, he ordered his guards. Let their parents watch. Fear is more effective than pain. But as his soldiers moved toward the prison blocks, the facility's lights began to flicker. The air grew cold, and shadows seemed to move where no shadows should be. Then the walls simply vanished. Not destroyed, not blown apart. They just stopped existing. One moment there were solid barriers of metal and stone. The next moment there was only empty air. The Watcher ship that materialized above the prison was smaller than the massive vessels that had confronted the Imperial fleet, but it was still the size of a city. Its dark hull reflected no light, making it look like a hole in space itself. Guards who moments before had been eager to carry out executions now cowered as strange lights descended from the ship. The lights touched each prisoner gently, and suddenly they were elsewhere, aboard the Watcher vessel, safe and protected. Warden Zulmar found himself alone in what had been his prison, surrounded by empty cells and the echoing silence of his own cruelty. Emperor Zalthek watched the reports, flood in with growing rage. Prison after prison emptied. Slaves vanishing from labor camps. Entire populations of subjugated worlds simply disappearing, leaving behind only the imperial administrators who had oppressed them. "They're taking our property," he snarled. "Our workers, our soldiers, our resources." "Your Majesty," General Mortek said carefully, "perhaps we should consider negotiation. These beings clearly have power beyond our understanding." The Emperor turned on him with fury blazing in his eyes. "Negotiation? I am Zalthek. I do not negotiate with thieves and terrorists. He activated the Empire's ultimate communication array, sending his voice to every remaining Imperial world, every loyal fleet commander, every satellite still under his control. Citizens of the Empire, we face an unprecedented threat from unknown aliens who seek to destroy everything we have built. They steal our property, attack our ships, and threaten our very way of life. But we will not yield. We will not bow. We will fight with every weapon at our disposal. The response was immediate. Across the Empire, hidden weapons were revealed. Secret research projects were activated. Doomsday weapons that had been held in reserve for the ultimate emergency were brought online. On the fortress world of Grim Talk, scientists activated a planet-killer cannon capable of destroying entire star systems. On the research station at Dark Nebula, they unleashed experimental weapons that could tear holes in space itself. In the deepest vaults of the Imperial Treasury, ancient weapons from races they had conquered long ago were brought forth and aimed at the stars. Captain Bayek. June sat in his darkened fighter, part of Admiral Veltar's disabled fleet, and listened to the Emperor's speech with growing horror. He could see other Imperial ships around him, their crews trapped inside vessels that no longer responded to their commands. But he could also see something else. The Watcher ships were not attacking them. They simply waited, patient as the stars themselves, while the Empire prepared for its final desperate assault. A voice came through his fighter's communication system, not Imperial command, but the resistance frequency. All Imperial personnel, the voice said, you are not our enemies. You are soldiers following orders, just as we were. The war is not between us. It is between the Empire and justice itself. June recognized the voice. It was General Oh Sung, the legendary resistance leader who had escaped from the labor camps. Your Emperor has chosen to sacrifice everything rather than admit he was wrong, Sung continued. He will use weapons that will destroy entire worlds just to spite those who oppose him. You do not have to die for his pride. Around him, June could see other fighters powering down their systems. Their pilots had heard the same message, made the same choice. The Empire's grip on its own forces was weakening. But in the deep reaches of space, Emperor Zaltek's ultimate weapons were charging up. On Kepler 442b, the humans felt the ancient, ruins pulse with increasing energy. Dr. Park Yuna watched her instruments with growing alarm as readings climbed beyond anything they had recorded before. Something's changed, she told the others. The Watchers are preparing for something big. Li Hyun looked up at the sky, where distant stars were flickering with unnatural light. The Emperor's weapons were powering up across the galaxy, and even from here they could feel the buildup of destructive energy. He's really going to do it, Hyun said quietly. He's going to try to destroy everything rather than surrender. Choi Min looked up from his equipment, his face pale. I'm picking up massive energy signatures from Imperial worlds, planet killers, star breakers, weapons that could crack the galaxy in half. The voice of the Watchers filled the air around them once more, but this time it carried a note of deep sadness. The compact allows for mercy. It allows for redemption. But some choose to embrace destruction rather than accept change. We are sorry for what must come next. In space above them, the single Watcher ship began to multiply. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 8 became dozens. Each new vessel was identical to the original, each one carrying the weight of cosmic authority. But these ships were different from the ones that had disabled the Imperial fleet. These moved with purpose, with the terrible certainty of judgment, rendered. Emperor Zaltek stood on his crystal throne and screamed his defiance at the stars. Fire! Fire everything! Burn them from the sky! Show them what happens when they threaten the Empire! Across the galaxy, the most powerful weapons ever created by the Kaleth Empire opened fire. Planet killers that could turn worlds to dust, starbreakers that could nova a sun, reality rippers that could tear holes in space and time itself. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize half the galaxy, and every single weapon passed through the Watcher ships as if they were made of mist. Impossible, Zaltek whispered, his voice lost in the enormity of his failure. The Watchers had given him every chance. They had offered mercy, negotiation, peaceful surrender. They had warned him of the consequences of his choices. Now judgment had come. The Emperor's ultimate weapons, designed to destroy solar systems, turned their power on empty space. The galaxy's most advanced technology proved as effective as throwing stones at the void. And in that moment of absolute failure, Zaltek finally understood what he faced. Not another empire, not another species seeking conquest. He faced the guardians of creation itself, beings so far beyond his understanding that his greatest weapons were toys to them. The age of the Caleth Empire was ending, not in glorious battle, but in the realization of how small and petty they had always been. Above every imperial world, Watcher ships took position and waited for the final act to begin. The moment came without warning, without ceremony, without the drama that Emperor Zaltek had expected for the end of his reign. One instant, the largest fleet in galactic history floated in space around Nexus Prime, weapons charged and ready for the final battle. The next instant, they were simply gone, not destroyed, not exploded into debris, not even reduced to atoms. They had never existed. Admiral Veltar stood on his bridge, surrounded by his officers, giving orders for the last desperate assault. Then he was standing alone in empty space, somehow still alive, somehow still breathing, watching the stars where his fleet had been just moments before. On 10,000 worlds across the Empire, the same thing happened to every military installation, every orbital platform, every weapon of war. Barracks that had housed millions of soldiers became empty buildings. Shipyards that had built instruments of conquest became vacant lots. Even personal weapons carried by individual soldiers simply vanished from their hands. The Caleth empires. Military had been erased from reality as if it had never been. Emperor Zaltek sat on his crystal throne, staring at communication panels that showed nothing but silence. Every fleet, every base, every armed vessel in his empire had simply stopped existing. But the civilian infrastructure remained untouched. Power plants still worked, hospitals still functioned, schools still taught children. Only the instruments of war were gone. "This is impossible," he whispered to the empty throne room. His advisors, his generals, his guards, all had carried weapons, and so all had vanished with them. "You cannot simply erase matter from existence." The voice that answered him came from everywhere and nowhere, calm and patient as always. "We do not erase matter. We restore it to the state it would have held if it had never been turned to purposes of conquest and oppression. Your weapons become the raw materials they once were. Your ships return to the metals and composites from which they were built. Your soldiers wake up in their homes, wondering why they ever thought war was necessary." Through the great windows of his throne room, Zaltek could see the capital city spread out below. Ships still moved through the air, but they were civilian transports, cargo haulers, personal vehicles. The military traffic that had dominated the skies for centuries was simply gone. "You have destroyed my empire," he said. "We have freed your people," the Watchers replied. "An empire built on suffering cannot be allowed to stand. But we do not punish the innocent for the crimes of their leaders." On Kepler 442b, the humans watched in awe as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Lee Hyun stood next to Dr. Park, Yuna at their communication array, hardly believing what they were hearing. "Every Imperial fleet gone," Choi Min reported, his voice full of wonder. "Every military installation, every weapons factory, every armed soldier. But the civilian populations are unharmed." 3,000 years of military buildup, General Oh Sung said quietly. Wiped away in an instant. Yuna looked at the ancient ruins which still glowed with gentle blue light. The symbols on the stones had changed again, now showing patterns that seemed to represent peace rather than warning. They're judges, she said suddenly. The Watchers aren't conquerors or destroyers. They're cosmic judges deciding what can exist and what cannot. Judge, jury, and executioner, Hyun observed. But they only execute the tools of oppression, not the people who wielded them. A new voice crackled through their communication system. Not the deep cosmic tone of the Watchers, but something more familiar. Human voices speaking in languages from across the galaxy. This is Transport 7, requesting coordinates for resettlement. We have 2,000 former Imperial prisoners aboard. Medical ship 12 to any human settlement. We have wounded refugees from the labor camps. Can anyone provide medical assistance? Cargo Fleet Delta requesting food and supplies. We're carrying families who haven't had a real meal in years. Hyun felt tears on his cheeks as he realized what was happening. The Watchers weren't just destroying the Empire's military power. They were bringing home everyone the Empire had taken. Captain Bayek Jun found himself standing in his childhood bedroom on Kaleth Prime, wearing civilian clothes he hadn't seen in 20 years. His fighter was gone. His weapons were gone. Even his military rank insignia had vanished. But he was alive, unharmed, and somehow his memories of war felt distant and unimportant. Around the world, former Imperial soldiers were having the same experience. They remembered their service, but the desire for conquest, the pride in domination, the fear that had driven them to support the Empire, all of it felt like a bad dream from which they had finally awakened. Some wept, some laughed. Many simply sat in confusion, wondering how they had ever thought that crushing other species was a noble calling. Commander Lim Wu had been captain of an Imperial dreadnought just minutes before. Now he stood in his garden on a peaceful farming world, holding a child he barely remembered having. His ship was gone, his crew was scattered, his empire had fallen. But for the first time in decades, he felt truly at peace. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 10,000 worlds. Kaleth citizens who had supported the Empire out of fear or ignorance found themselves free to make their own choices. Without the constant propaganda of military superiority, without the ever-present threat of punishment for dissent, they began to see their neighbors, human, alien, or otherwise, as people rather than subjects or enemies. Emperor Zalthek remained on his throne, alone in his vast palace. The crown that had once commanded the loyalty of billions now felt like a weight of shame. The crystal throne that had been carved from the heart of a conquered world now seemed like a monument to his own arrogance. "What happens now?" he asked the empty air. The Watcher's voice came to him gently, without the cosmic authority it had carried before. Now it sounded almost compassionate. "Now you learn to live without power over others. Your people are free to choose their own leaders, their own paths. Some will forgive you, others will not. That is as it should be. And me, what is my punishment? Your punishment is to live with the knowledge of what you did, to see the peace that comes when oppression ends, to understand how much suffering you caused in the name of your pride." Zalthek looked around his empty throne room, then slowly stood and walked toward the door. The crown fell from his head and shattered on the crystal floor. But he didn't look back. On the human colony worlds, celebration was tempered by the enormity of what had happened. Lee Hyun stood before a crowd of humans who had gathered in the settlement's central square, trying to find words for the impossible. "The Empire is gone," he said simply. "After 3,000 years, it's over." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Hyun raised his hand for silence. "This isn't our victory," he continued. "We didn't win this war. We were rescued by beings so far beyond us that we can barely comprehend them. And now we have to prove that we deserve the freedom they've given us. Dr. Song Hana, recently freed from imperial captivity, stepped forward. What do we do now? How do we rebuild? Before Hyun could answer, the air around them shimmered, and a new voice spoke. Not the cosmic authority of the Watchers' collective consciousness, but something more personal, more individual. You learn. You grow. You help others as you have been helped. A figure materialized before them, tall, elegant, composed of light rather than matter. It was humanoid, but clearly not human, ancient beyond measure but somehow timeless. I am what you might call a representative of the Watchers. We have observed your species for many years, through your slavery under the Empire and your resistance to it. We have been impressed by your refusal to abandon hope, even in the darkest times. The figure gestured toward the ruins, which pulsed with gentle light. These structures were placed here long ago on worlds throughout the galaxy where younger species might one day grow to wisdom. They are tests and invitations. When a species proves itself worthy, when it chooses cooperation over conquest, protection over predation, the Watchers take notice. What does that mean for us? Yuna asked. It means you have a choice. You can remain here, on these worlds, and build peaceful lives for yourselves. You can join the galactic community as equals, not subjects, or... The figure paused, and the lights around it seemed to brighten. Or you can join us. Not as subjects or servants, but as partners. The galaxy is vast, and there are other species suffering under other empires. The work of protection never ends. Hyun felt his heart racing. You're offering us a chance to help others the way you helped us? You would not be the first species to make this choice. The Watchers began as a single civilization that transcended physical existence. Over millions of years, others have joined us. Each brings their own perspective, their own wisdom, their own compassion. The representative gestured toward the stars, where the lights of Watcher ships could still be seen. Humanity has shown that it values freedom over power, justice over conquest. These are rare qualities in the galaxy. We would be honored to have you join our vigil. As the humans looked up at the stars, they realized that their liberation was not an ending, but a beginning. The Empire was gone, but there were others out there who still suffered under similar oppression. And now, for the first time in their history, humanity had the chance to be the rescuers rather than the rescued. The age of human freedom had 5 years had passed since the fall of the Kaleth Empire, and the galaxy looked very different. Where once there had been massive military fleets patrolling conquered systems, now there were peaceful trade ships moving freely between worlds. Former prison planets had become thriving colonies. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were rebuilding their cultures and exploring the stars as equals. Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of the CSS Freedom, humanity's first Watcher-enhanced vessel. It was smaller than the massive ships the Watchers themselves used, but it carried technology beyond anything the Empire had possessed. More importantly, it carried a crew dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Vega system. A species called the Thren are requesting assistance against something called the Dominax Empire." Yun smiled grimly. The Dominax were another conquering race, one that had remained hidden during the Kaleth era, but had emerged to fill the power vacuum. They had apparently assumed that with the Kaleth gone, they could claim their territory. They were about to learn otherwise. "Set course for Vega," he ordered, "and send word to command. Let them know we have another empire that needs education." Dr. Park Yuna sat in her laboratory aboard the Freedom, studying reports from across the galaxy. As humanity's lead xenoarchaeologist and liaison with the Watchers, She had access to knowledge that spanned millions of years of galactic history. The ruins on Kepler 442b had been just one of thousands of similar sites scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one was a beacon, placed by the Watchers on worlds where younger species might evolve. When those species reached a certain level of moral development, the beacons activated and called to their creators. "Fascinating," she murmured as she reviewed the latest data. "The pattern is always the same. A species faces oppression, some choose to resist despite impossible odds, and their courage activates the beacon." Her assistant, Dr. Kim Nari, looked up from her own work. "So the Watchers aren't just randomly helping people. They're looking for specific qualities." "Exactly. Courage in the face of tyranny, willingness to sacrifice for others, the refusal to give up hope even when everything seems lost." Yuna gestured to the holographic display showing dozens of worlds where beacons had activated in recent years. "We're not the only species they've noticed recently." The bridge of the Freedom buzzed with activity as they approached the Vega system. Tactical displays showed a dozen Dominax warships surrounding a small planet populated by the Thren, a peaceful species of amphibious humanoids who had never developed military technology. "Classic predator behavior," observed Commander Kim Tae, now serving as Hyun's first officer. "Attack the weakest targets first, build up confidence and resources, then move on to bigger prey." "Not this time," Hyun said quietly. He opened a channel to the Dominax fleet. "This is Admiral Lee Hyun of the Galactic Protection Force. You are in violation of the Compact of Free Worlds. Withdraw immediately." The response came from the Dominax flagship, the voice arrogant and dismissive. "Unknown vessel, you are interfering in a legitimate conquest operation. The Thren are primitives who cannot defend themselves. By right of superior force, they belong to us." "By right of superior force," Hyun repeated. "They belong to no one. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal, or we will remove you ourselves." Laughter came through the communication channel. "One ship against 12? You are either very brave or very stupid, human." "Let's find out which," Hyun said, and closed the channel. The CSS Freedom didn't look like much compared to the massive Dominax warships. It was sleek and elegant, where they were brutal and angular, but appearances could be deceiving. When the Dominax opened fire, their plasma beams and missile volleys passed harmlessly through the human ship. The Freedom existed partially in the same dimensional space as the Watchers' vessels, making it immune to conventional weapons. The counterattack was swift and precise. Beams of coherent energy reached out from the Freedom and touched each Dominax ship in turn. Where the beams made contact, weapons systems simply stopped working. Engines went silent, life support continued to function, but everything designed for war became inert. "What? What did you do to us?" the Dominax commander demanded, his voice no longer arrogant. "We gave you the same choice the Kaleth Empire received," Hyun replied. "Stop attacking innocent people, or lose the ability to attack anyone. You cannot do this. We are the Dominax. We rule by strength." "You ruled by strength. Now you get to learn a different way." General Oh-sung stood in the council chambers of New Geneva, the capital of the newly formed Democratic Coalition of Systems. Representatives from over 300 species sat around the circular table, discussing trade agreements, resource sharing, and mutual defense pacts. It was everything he had dreamed of during his years as a slave in the imperial labor camps. The "Motion passes," announced President Park Min, humanity's elected representative to the coalition. "The Altair system will receive full membership and protection status." Sung smiled as he watched former enemies working together to solve problems, through discussion rather than violence. The Kaleth who had chosen to join the coalition sat next to species they had once oppressed, contributing their technological knowledge to peaceful projects. Not all Kaleth had made that choice. Some had retreated to their homeworld, bitter and resentful. Others had joined smaller groups trying to recreate the old empire on a smaller scale. But most had adapted surprisingly well to a galaxy where strength was measured by how much you helped others, rather than how much you could hurt them. "General," President Min approached him after the session ended, "we have a request from the Watchers. They want to know if you would be interested in joining their council." Sung raised an eyebrow. The Council of Watchers was made up of representatives from species that had transcended physical existence over millions of years. For a human to be invited to join them was an incredible honor. "What would that involve?" he asked. "Helping to guide their decisions about when and how to intervene in galactic conflicts. Your experience fighting oppression and your understanding of different species would be valuable to them." Sung considered the offer. He was getting old, and his body was worn out from years of hard labor and harder fighting. The chance to continue. Protecting the innocent in a different form was appealing. "Tell them I'm honored by the offer," he said. "But I'd like to finish training the next generation of resistance leaders first. Someone needs to be ready for the empires we haven't discovered yet." Choi Min worked in his engineering bay aboard the Freedom, making final adjustments to their dimensional drive system. The technology the Watchers had shared with humanity was beyond anything they had imagined, but it required constant maintenance and careful calibration. "How's she running?" asked Captain Lim Wu, who had become one of humanity's most skilled Watcher tech pilots after his conversion from the Imperial Navy. "Like a dream," Min replied, wiping grease from his hands. "The dimensional phase variance is holding steady, and the energy matrix is operating at 97% efficiency." "Good. We're going to need all the power we can get for this next mission," Ine looked up from his work. "Another empire?" "Worse. A species that's been enslaving others for over 10,000 years. They call themselves the Eternal Hierarchy, and they've been very careful to stay hidden until now." 10,000 years, Minnie repeated. "That's a lot of suffering to undo." "Yes, it is, but that's why we're here." Dr. Song Hana stood before a group of young humans in the Coalition Academy, teaching the next generation about galactic history and the responsibilities that came with their new role as protectors. The Watchers could have simply destroyed the Kaleth Empire, she explained to her students. They had the power to wipe out every Kaleth in the galaxy if they chose to, but they didn't. "Can anyone tell me why?" A young woman raised her hand. "Because killing oppressors doesn't stop oppression. It just creates a vacuum for the next tyrant to fill." Exactly. The goal isn't to destroy evil, but to transform it, to show that there's a better way to live, a better way to organize society, a better way to relate to other species. Another student spoke up. "But what if they refuse to change? What if they keep trying to hurt people?" Hana smiled. "Then we make it impossible for them to hurt anyone while keeping them alive to see the peace their victims build without them. The greatest punishment for a tyrant isn't death, it's irrelevance." The CSS Freedom emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, now home to over 50 different species living in harmony. The ancient ruins that had started it all still glowed with soft blue light, serving as a reminder of how far they had all come. Admiral Lee Hyun looked out at the peaceful world below and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His hair was grayer, now, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the determination that had sustained him through the darkest days of Imperial rule. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from the Watchers. They've detected 17 new beacon activations in the Outer Rim. Species just beginning to call for help." 17, Hyun mused. "That's the largest single activation we've seen." "It appears that word is spreading," Commander Tay observed. "Other oppressed peoples are learning T."